Thank you.
Hi, Sarah.
I didn't even have to tell you to stop talking. You just did. That was really nice. My name is Sarah Danziger, and I'm the Education Program Manager here at CPW, Center for Photography at Woodstock, for those of you who are new or who haven't been here since maybe we were in Woodstock. You're here for our weekly Meet the Artist night. It's a night where we host either visiting or local artists to come talk about their work and their process. And it's a really nice night of the week, and they're always free. So please join us. We'll be doing this again in 2024. We owe a big thank you to the Leonian Foundation for making this possible. It's been a really beautiful year. And a lot of the talks that you might have missed are online on our YouTube. So please check that out if you like what you see. This is our last of the year, and I'm very excited because we're joined by one of our past artists in residence, Naima Green. Naima is an artist and educator who pictures Black and queer individuals and communities to document their vibrant relationships to place and pleasure. Green accesses and prioritizes the nature of intimacy, safety, and self-recognition. She considers water as fluid and regenerative and presents a window into the relationship between pleasure and the complex experience of the ocean, beauty, leisure, buoyancy, and overwhelm. Oral and written histories and the archival material essential to uncovering these stories are critical to her process. By synthesizing archival research with outreach and conversation with current sitters, she frames photomaking as a continuum, and her still images as kinetic living histories. She has a couple books and a deck in the back. Please take a look after her talk. Without further ado, Naima, please. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. Thank you, Sarah, Nicole, and Brian, and everyone at CPW for having me. Okay. All right, can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So it's especially lovely to be here today on the solstice, the winter solstice, and in Kingston, because I was first introduced to Kingston about 10 years ago by a mentor turned friend turned family named Lisa Gail Collins and her family Lee and Sasha in Memphis. So I have been coming to Kingston for many years, and it's been such a grounding and transformative place for me. And in this year in particular, which feels like one of the most extreme years of my life, filled with grief and also many beautiful, big life changes. It feels nice to end the year here. So I am going to start by reading this poem by Banu Kapil called Ritual for Autumn Equinox. Invert yourself at the edge of the water so that the top of your skull or your hair makes contact with the current or wave. And if this is not possible, if your capacity to take this posture is restricted in any way, then feel it in your body first. And if that is not possible, or if feeling is not possible in this moment, then take a glass of water and add some pink Himalayan salt, fresh lemon juice, and pepper. Drink this. And if this is not possible, then lift your face to the rain. And if it never rains, then wait until the water finds you. Wait for the unexpected emotion that changes or charges your very real heart. And then step through the indigo door, as Rachel Pollack said, into another world. This poem has been such a source of energy and grounding and inspiration for me. In the last couple of years, I've been working towards a project, an exhibition called I Keep Missing My Water that was at ICA-VCU in Richmond, Virginia, September 2022 until earlier this year. And I kept thinking about, I've always been interested in making work in nature, outside, in water. But I started really from a place of thinking about green spaces and the time I spent by the water was always personal and never really entered my practice until probably 2016 when I started photographing at Reese Beach in the Rockaways in New York. And when I was commissioned for the exhibition at ICA-BCU, I started thinking about different regions across the U.S. So in particular, the Tidewater region in Virginia, which is Hampton and Norfolk. And I have family down there and kind of some different familial lineages in Hampton. And so I went down to visit a friend, an arts critic. Her name is Jessica Lynn, who grew up in Virginia, grew up in Hampton. And I asked her to take me to a place that felt really significant to her in her life and in her childhood and growing up in the area. And so we went to a place called Yorktown Beach, which used to be a military fort at one point. And we kind of climbed down a very prickly hill to reach this area. And in the last few years, a lot of my work is around kind of the process of discovering the location in that moment. So as much as I love to scout and kind of know exactly where I'm going to go or what's going to happen, that it doesn't always feel the same way whenever I show up that day. And so this was one of those cases where we thought we knew where we were going to shoot and it just wasn't feeling right. And so we drove around, and then it was getting dark and I was worried that we weren't going to have any light. And then we just kind of slid down this hill to get to the water. And so this is one of my earlier pictures at Reese in 2017, in early fall in September. And this is a significant marker of time for me because it is a moment where I'm most clearly able to see how I occupy this liminal space of both being a community member, being in the moment, and also documenting the moment. And so I was laying kind of right in this space right here, got up to make a few pictures and laid back down. And that was also a shift in the way that I was making work, because I typically would email sitters in advance, know exactly where we're going to meet, kind of arrange a 2-hour window or ask people to reserve a 2-hour window of their time for me, so we can like talk and get to know each other first. And this changed all of that, where I had no idea what I just wanted to go to the beach because it was a nice day. And so then this moment of kind of towels and blankets just filling up to the point where you can't even see the sand, and Athil in the background wanted to make a fort, and I met a handful of people this day, and so kind of allowing more space for spontaneity and chance, which previously was a little bit harder for me in my work. And in 2017, I also was thinking a lot about the interior world. And so not requiring or asking a sitter to do so much work of always gazing back into the camera or confronting the viewer or confronting me as the photographer, and allowing more space for the interior world, for a refusal, and to not have to be perceived in a confrontational way, which is kind of the opposite of this project called Jewels from the Hinterland, which I started in 2012. And I was really interested in the way that traditional narratives from the 1960s, like thinking about Gordon Parks as a Harlem family and Bruce Davidson's East 100th Street, were still pretty pervasive in thinking about Black urban life. And so, as not necessarily to deny that the experiences that they were photographing were not true, because that they very well are and they were true, but to add to the narrative of what urban life can be and has been and can look like. And so I started photographing artists and creatives in urban green spaces in and around New York, all over New York, and also wanting to challenge what a green space could be. So I photographed in, major parks like Central Park and Prospect Park, but also kind of little patches of green, like medians and community gardens, and just spaces where the green just pops up and is encountered rather than a manicured or a designated park space or green space. And a lot of this work is thinking about leisure, belonging, and the relationship between nature and the person. A patch of nasturtiums. So this is in Oakland. In 2018 and 2019, I was commissioned by Jeffrey Henson Scales, who was then the opinion editor at the New York Times, to take jewels from the hinterland to different cities throughout the United States. And in doing that, I went to Miami, Oakland, Houston, and Chicago. So we were also thinking about Black migration patterns. And in those cities, a lot of the people that I met, because I grew up in New York, I knew a lot of the places where I wanted to photograph, or I was familiar with a lot of the parks and the greenways, or I had encountered them at some point over the years. And I was a little bit troubled by going to new places because I didn't want to come in and assume that it was the same thing that was happening. So when I traveled to the new locations, sitters actually guided me through their cities. And so all of the locations, almost all of the locations were selected by each of the sitters that I met. And this picture is a picture of a Haitian artist named Michelle Lisa, who lives in Miami. And this picture was, at the time, I considered it a mistake or a failure because it was not what I had intended to do, and it happened because of a mechanical glitch. And then a couple years later, I returned to this image, not necessarily as like her portrait for the series, but as a significant shift in how I thought about the work, where it's actually doing everything that I'm saying by physically layering the figure on top of the green space by double exposure. And it kind of, there was some sort of, not only a glitch in the process, but like a reframing of how I thought about the work and what I could do and where I could go with it. So I kind of put down Jewels from the Hinterland in 2018, 2019, and started thinking about new projects, new ways of working. And in 2018, over the course of 9 days, I photographed upwards of 100 people for Pursuit, which is in the back of the room. It's a deck of playing cards, and it centers queer, trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people. And so with this deck, I was inspired by Catherine Opie's Dyke deck, which I stumbled upon in a database in the New York Public Library and ordered a deck on eBay. And when I saw it, I remember thinking about like how exciting it was to hold these cards in my hand, to think about how we can carry an object with us that it can fit in my pocket, and also felt like there was something missing around the queer community I was in at that time in Brooklyn. And Opie's deck was made in 1994 in the Bay. So I thought about how it might be interesting to reimagine the Dyke deck in 2018, 2019 in Brooklyn. And it was my first time doing a large-scale studio project, my first time doing an open call, and about 65% of the people who are in the deck were people that I was meeting on set for the first time. And in making this deck, I was thinking about missing data sets, which artist and researcher Mimio Nuha describes as places that are curiously devoid of data. And so thinking about in times of hyper surveillance, in times of constantly being monitored and being perceived and being photographed, why are there so many areas where people are left out or people are unseen or whatever it might be? And so it felt like a really important time to make the deck, but also make sure that people were named in their participation. So on each card, each person is named their name at that time in 2019. And it felt important, especially in a lot of the queer history that I learned. I was learning about people after they had died. And so it felt important to honor and name people while they are still alive. And the deck centers collectives, individuals, and couples. I asked people to come in whatever state of dress or undress they wanted to come in. They could bring props, they could bring really anything they wanted. And there was a color palette, a pretty wide color palette that I asked people to stick to. And so while I didn't want there to be a hierarchy in the actual suits, what I created in the hierarchy is that the royals are collectives, they're community leaders, they're healers, and their families. And so thinking about how from the whole it trickles down into the individual. And on the back of the cards, which were designed by Rin Kim, I was really taken by the symbol of a serpent that I had seen on a ancient Mexican stone carving at the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico City, and later learned that serpents represent transformation and fertility and rebirth. And it felt like a very significant symbol to also represent what this deck is and can be, and what queerness is and can be. And so the serpent is the anchor symbol, and then around it are abstracted Ghanaian Adinkra symbols that represent interconnectedness and interdependence, and reinforcing the way that we need each other in life, in community. So from the deck, I knew that everyone who sat for the project could not be in the deck of cards because it's a fixed number. And so I wanted to also think about where is a place for everyone to actually be represented. In 2020, I started working with a number of collaborators who were both in the deck and folks who were signed up. There was going to be a second sitting for Pursuit in 2020 at Recess in Brooklyn that we had to cancel. But all of those people were then invited to contribute to the digital archive, which is called Skin Contact. And so thinking about being in a time where touch was so charged and forbidden in many ways, that how could I think about, like, what does it mean to create some sort of care package, some sort of touch point, some sort of offering that might be a balm or a salve in some way during the height of the pandemic. And so in Skin Contact, which is a digital archive, there are interviews with couples who were also business partners. So thinking about, like, what does it mean to be in a relationship with someone, to be in a romantic relationship with someone, to be in a business relationship with someone and not see anyone else. There are love letters. There are herbal recipes. There are shopping lists. There are show recommendations. And it's also a time when I started thinking about my phone, the images that I made on my phone, as images that actually had some significance. And previously, I was a little bit of a snob in the way of thinking about, like, how images were made and what images I valued and what tools I used. And so it was but I had no desire to pick up any of my cameras in 2020. And so I turned to my phone, which I used all the time to make snapshots of moments that actually were really important to me. And so all of the images kind of in the background as you scroll through Skin Contact are made with a phone. And so last year in 2022, the digital world of Skin Contact entered into the physical space of the exhibition, and I Keep Missing My Water. And so here you have kind of a blown up grid, and layered on top are photographs. Layered on top is also the love letter by Rin that is in the archive. There are videos that are layered on top of the wall as well. And I'm going to play the audio for you. Like, when you enter the exhibition space, this is what you would hear. What did you tell me the name of your car was before this car, Alberta?
Oh, before Alberta was Samantha Louise Lamont Pontiac Oven.
Wait, Samantha
Louise
Lamont
Pontiac Oven.
Lamont Pontiac Govan.
And the Queen Samantha and Alberta was, what's the name? Mm, mm, mm. I have to think of it, but she had a name too. Alberta K.
That's what we were in today.
Okay, we were in Alberta K. And it's only had 3 cars. So the middle car,
When did you get Alberta K?
Alberta K I bought here
Okay.
when Jeffrey was
In the 80s?
Jeffrey was out of town. So I bought it.
You bought a car?
Yeah.
Highway 46 east using the upcoming right lane.
No, not the 3 X's, the W, girl. It says I'm extra grateful for W.
Maybe I need you to tell my friends about me. Yes. How do I do it?
No, you know, because
Yeah.
you're trying to pass it off.
No.
No, you need to you need to use your fake ass to make it pass it off. Please.
No. I just want you to tell them that I do it. Not how I do it.
Look, this nigga do this shit. Actually, I was gonna say 24/7, but probably every 15-second intervals of a day. And there's a thrust, very lively pelvic thrust with it. Sometimes I feel like it's earthquake. My thanks, Fatty.
Thank you.
Oh my god, that car. How does it feel? Where do you feel it? Never forget it.
And I see stars, so many stars. And I just look up, I see stars outside. And it feels so good and right. Surfing makes me feel free because when I'm in the water, I'm reminded of my very specific, particular body that contains me. And at the same time, I'm reminded that my very specific body that contains me is also part of or in rhythm with something much bigger than me, like the ocean. There are these moments
these moments of like infinity where I feel in total equilibrium within myself and everything that's buoying me in that moment. I take it back. I said it's gonna be a fucking Brooklyn Botanical Garden in this bitch, okay? I'm so glad that we have each other. I'm so glad I have you because I understand. I understand. Control me, 'cause it feels
Take your
so
ass to bed.
good.
You're so bad. You don't want to do no
When
sleep
I
rituals. No sleep.
know.
You love living on the edge. Just like mixing gluten-free and gluten pasta. Living on the motherfucking edge. This is just a reminder again. What I'm about to remind you of. I don't hate you. I love you. I love you. I love you. And now, finally, at 1:32 p.m., I can move my neck a little bit. Still not all the way, but I have a little bit more movement in my neck. And more of the excruciating pain has subsided. 1:33 p.m. But the purpose of this phone call, even though this is not a phone call, is that I love you. Love you. I love you. Naima. I love you. Naima. I love you.
We can all identify that one person during that one time when we really needed one person, just one. I'm looking at you.
So I have been keeping an audio library or sound library. I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 years. I used to wake up and record my dreams. I used to, in the middle of the night, try to record my dreams so I wouldn't forget them. I save voice notes. I save voicemails, ambient sound, just walking along the street that I might like. And so that audio piece is a mixture of all sorts of those sounds. But most of the time, it's not about like having the perfect high quality, best recorded audio. It's about the kind of rawness of sending a voice note to someone or sending a voicemail. And I'm going to take you back through some of these images, starting here. This is a series from 2017 and 2018 called Attraction Experiment. And I invited, I think, about 50 people to participate in this in a very vague way. And the range was from exes, current partners, friends, anyone that I had any sort of attraction to or with at that time. And it was also at a time where I was not very interested in the power dynamics created by the photographer and the sitter. And I wanted to work towards a more neutral space where I wasn't in charge of the shutter. And so we met in a photo booth. And in order for folks to participate, they had to bring me 5 directives or instructions for what they wanted me to do during our portrait together. And people didn't know we were going to meet in a photo booth. So sometimes if the directive was like a big gestural thing, we had to pare it down to figure it out together. And I would be the actor and do whatever they asked of me. And I think because it was in a photo booth and because that experience is so fast, that I felt very safe to do to perform kind of in any way. And so after that double exposure of Michelle Lisa, that is when I started using double exposure in a more intentional way and thinking about how a double exposure can create a breath or a beat or movement within the image, still within a single image, and also how sequencing images can do that as well. And I think for so long, I was really demanding around a singular image representing a moment and realized that it did not have to be that way. And so the introduction of sequences using more than one image to actually think through or open up more space inside of a moment. And so during this time, I also was thinking about like, okay, the ocean, yes, but what else are spaces of like, what else is wet? What else is, what's the opposite of that? And really trying to parse through all of these moments. So thinking about urine, thinking about spit, like especially for women, and wanting to be more public or confrontational about, you know, why is it so taboo for women to pee in public but not for men, and why is it so hard to find public restrooms, and why is it so challenging to navigate especially urban spaces in that way. Yeah, and bring that into the work and into things that I'm thinking about into kind of what I'm making. This is a still from a video called The Intimacy of Before. Thinking also about the remnants and the leftovers and what's needed to prepare yourself. So this is Aika's wetsuit, and you hear her talking in that audio piece about kind of what surfing does for her and what being on the water does for her, and wanting to include also some of the materials, like what does that feel like? What is the neoprene kind of, what is that texture on your body? What does it feel to pull it off after you're wet? That all of that can come into picture making as well. And a lot of these moments are really about, or are mundane, and wanting to think about how maybe it's something that might be considered unspectacular, can be so ingrained in our memories and can be so nourishing and so fulfilling and so restorative. And I think in the pandemic, I really was reminded of that through the slowness or in the repetition of being in a one-bedroom apartment every single day. Like, how do I look at this space differently? How do I appreciate the light differently? How do I, just thinking about observation and not wanting to go stir crazy, and kind of like I have to find newness in this space that I'm in all the time. And so these are the last couple of slides, which is what I've been working on in the last 6 weeks. Some alternative process work. And so I am an educator and most recently taught darkroom photography at Smith College in Western Massachusetts, and have been in teaching darkroom, have been thinking a lot about alternative process and what that looks like for me in my own work. So I started taking some classes with a photographer in the area whose name is Morgan Post. So some of you might know him, but this is an albumin print that we made using eggs to coat the paper. And I think this was a tapioca treated paper. And so thinking about how natural materials and the egg was especially exciting for me because I already liked photographing eggs in my process. But bringing in some of the work that I was making into these very old, very, very old processes. And then these are a couple pictures from over the weekend where at CPW, I was making some contact sheets of layered cyanotype and platinum palladium and cali-type prints. And I will end there. Thank you. Yeah, if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer a few.
Could you say a little bit more about where you're going in the alternative process work?
I'm still figuring it out. Yeah, this is very, very new. And so, yeah, I really can't give you a concrete answer right now. It's play. I am interested in also kind of like the painterly qualities of this. So I also taught drawing and painting for quite some time. And before I was a photographer, thought I wanted to be a painter. And I think that these processes, and I'm also just so over spending so much time on the screen. So I think turning to analog as a way to use my hands more, as a way to just have different interactions with making images and these different processes, which are very slow. And I shoot film, which, you know, some people are like, oh, film is like the way you slow down, which in some ways, yes. But I think that the kind of developing and the processing and having to, you know, do a clarity wash for 15 minutes or, you know, I think something about the process of really waiting maybe a whole day to see what's going to happen to the image or how the print will come out feels really necessary to me right now. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Naima has a book in this beautiful deck, which I'm like, can you also mount it like this?
Yeah.